conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we take a break from talking specifically about the primaries coming up tomorrow, and instead we take a moment to dig into some other news. First, it looks like Democrat State House Representative Cole Carney will not be eligible to run for re-election due to her paperwork error. The judge, Philip Shepard, in Franklin County rules that a county restaurant tax law rules on whether it's constitutional or not from 2014. He does rule it's unconstitutional, but for all the wrong reasons. We'll be going into that. And then finally, Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman makes the stupidest comment ever regarding school choice that shows she is either not very bright or has a complete lack of self-respect and is a hack when it comes to public schools. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. But first, last Friday, we had a very unfortunate incident involving the PGA tournament occurring at Valhalla Golf Course in Louisville. Now, I'm going to go through this story with the information we have as of recording. New information could emerge as the cities and others investigate what exactly happened, including the charges against one of these people that are involved being dropped. But for those who are unaware, the PGA had come to Valhalla Golf Course for a big tournament. Now, Valhalla is towards Simpsonville, out Shelbyville Road in Louisville. And for some unknown reason, somebody decided the best and closest place to have everyone park was the Kentucky Expo Center, which is where like the state fair is, if you've ever been to that. And that parking lot is 20 miles away from the golf course. So for the event, they were then shuttling everyone from the Expo Center 20 miles to the golf course. So the extra long parking situation created a fair amount of additional traffic at the entrance, because when you're sitting there saying, look, I'm looking at an hour or so round trip just to get from my parked car, especially if you lived in the area, well, you just go ahead and get somebody to drop you off right at the gate, which creates more traffic at the gate than if parking was more reasonably closer and you didn't have to have an hour round trip on a shuttle, because less people would be getting dropped off. Instead, they would just park and then walk into the gate. Well, the added traffic created some confusion, and unfortunately, one of the shuttles that was running people from the Expo Center to the golf tournament ran over and killed a gentleman that was working as a security guard that was walking in early in the morning. Now, it was so early that it was dark. Keep that in mind as we talk about everything that's going on here. So that accident, now already super busy place. Already they've almost done everything they could to ensure that there's as much traffic as there possibly could be at this entrance into this golf course. And then on top of that, now you have the accident and traffic just becomes awfully held back. Now enter what is currently the world's #1 golfer, Scottie Scheffler. Now, reportedly, Scottie Scheffler, he's sitting in traffic and he was told by either another police officer or PGA official, I'm seeing it could be either, but he was told by somebody with authority that Scottie would look to and say, oh, you have authority, that he could go ahead and drive like up on a curb, go around to get into the golf course. And while he was, and keep in mind too, he's driving a vehicle that apparently was marked as a PGA official vehicle. So while he drives up on the curb to go around the accident, as he was told he could, then another officer apparently is making hand signals to him, telling him to stop or not do what he's doing or something. And Scottie continues driving ahead anyways. And the officer reportedly like jumped onto the vehicle for some reason and grabbed it. He's like, 2-ton vehicle, I've got this. So he grabs onto the vehicle to stop it apparently. And then Scottie drove like another 10 yards or so into the Valhalla actual entrance and then stopped and reportedly rolled down his window expecting to talk to the officer, be like, oh, I think there was some confusion here. And the officer quickly drug him out of the vehicle and arrested him. And Scotty Scheffler was then taken down to the jail. He was booked, and he was released in time to make it to his tee time. So that's the story as it's shaping up now, based on the information I know now, and we know now as of the time I'm recording this. And by the time I record this, it's very likely that the charges against Scotty Scheffler will have already been dropped. I will talk about more of why that is here in a second. And so before I lay out the commentary, I want you to know that. And there's another thing worth noting here, just so you understand, okay? One, PGA tee times are extremely strict. And if you're late to your tee time, it does count against you. But not only if you're late to your tee time does it count against you, but you want to play at the top of your game if you're a number one golfer. Here's just a small example, okay? For those of you who don't know, and for those of you unaware, my son golfs in PGA Junior Leagues and golfs in all kinds of junior tour tournaments and things like that. He golfs a lot. He golfs in 3 tournaments a week. And anybody who's ever done golf tournaments will tell you the difference between 1st and 5th or 10th place, depending on how many kids show up, can be as little as 4 or 5 strokes. It is not many. And so keep that in mind, because when you look at the PGA purse payouts for Valhalla, 1st place and 10th place had a difference in purse payouts and prize money winnings of around $2.75 million just for this specific event. Not to mention all the other things like standings and as such sponsorship deals that, not staying at the top of your game can affect. Plus, you just naturally want to compete. And I want to note that, okay? Not because I'm saying that it's okay for him to break the law because, millions of dollars are on the line. I'm not saying that at all. I want you to understand the mindset that is going into the world's number one golfer when he is reportedly told, that he can go around this holdup. Because you got a lot of people out here that are blaming all kinds of different people. But I think you have to understand everything that's going on here. It being dark, confusion, extra traffic, because we're hearing people say, oh, it's Scotty Scheffler's fault. He isn't special. He needs to follow the law like everyone else. And he is to blame here, and he needs to apologize. I've seen that. We'll talk about that and why those people are wrong. I've heard people sitting here saying that, oh, it's all this police officer's fault. Police should be ashamed of themselves, and cops are bad. Those people are wrong. I'll explain why they're wrong. And then there's been other people trying to tie this into things like Breonna Taylor and back the blue until, something bad happens, or you all see just how awful cops are. Those people also idiots and wrong, just to make it clear. Everybody who has those opinions, wrong. But only the Black Lives Matter people are complete idiots. Let's make that clear, okay? They're just dumb communists. That's what I call them. They're just dumb communists, okay? But everybody's wrong. I'm going to explain why everybody's wrong. And it's just possible that something can be nobody on the scene's fault, but yet be the complete and utter expected reaction when you have completely incompetent leaders, something that Louisville has unfortunately had to endure for a long time, but that's what happens when you keep voting for these people. So we'll be talking more about those 3 sides, why they're all wrong, after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. You want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head on over to theandrewshow.com, hit the Listen Now tab. You can check out old shows there. Make sure if you're listening to on those places, you subscribe to the podcast, follow along there. And you can also hit the contact tab there and leave a message. We'll be back in a few short minutes. And welcome back to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. Before the break, I started digging into and laying out the situation that occurred on Friday at the Louisville Valhalla Golf Course, where there was the PGA incident involving Scotty Scheffler being arrested after a security guard was unfortunately killed by a PGA transit pedestrian bus. And Scotty Scheffler went to go around the incident after he says being instructed to do so. And another officer has decided to jump on his car, pull him out of his car, and arrest him and send him to jail. And people are falling into three different categories. They're blaming either Scotty, they're blaming the cop, or there's a third kind of category that's blaming the cop and trying to tie this in to Black Lives Matter because and BLM, because you see some more so conservatives blaming the police officer in the incident. Let's go first, though, to blaming Scotty and why those people blaming Scotty are wrong. And on top are they wrong? One of the things I was seeing on a lot of these posts is them saying, Scotty Scheffler, he isn't special. He isn't any different than us. He isn't above the law, which is kind of odd to say in this situation. But we'll get around to that. So Scotty was, as he says he was, told to go up onto the median and go around the accident to get into the PGA by somebody of authority. That right there immediately relieves in my head basically 90% of the blame I would put at his feet. Now, some would say, well, the cop was signaling for him to stop. Well, first, it was dark. It was early. Did he see him? Second, maybe he was thinking, oh, he hasn't seen the giant PGA emblem on my vehicle and yet doesn't realize that I'm allowed to do this and doesn't know I'm a PGA golfer and I'm just following what I was told to do. And he just doesn't realize I'm not just some random vehicle. Also, if you're Scotty Scheffler in that position, because anytime I'm looking at these things, I want to put myself in the position of the people involved and see if I could find myself acting in the same way they did in a reasonable world. I'm putting myself in Scotty's position. You're naturally going to sway towards the option that lets you get in there and start warming up. Remember, literally millions of dollars are on the line here. Millions of dollars, as well as many of other things. And so he has tons of incentive to believe that when somebody tells him he's allowed to go around, he should go ahead and just go around. That's just putting this in his perspective. Now, for second to this whole he shouldn't be treated a special kind of situation. He should have known he shouldn't be allowed to drive around. You know, we're not talking about how he got treated by police while he's out on a night on the town. He obviously, at a night out on the town, should be treated the same way as everybody else. Like, in literally any situation, but the one where the officer is working a traffic cop type position in front of a PGA tournament, Scotty Scheffler should be treated exactly like you or me. But in this situation, he quite clearly is not like everyone else at all. Unless, of course, you are also a pro PGA golfer outside of a PGA golfing event. Let me describe this another way. Imagine a police officer's tasked with handling traffic for a Taylor Swift concert. Is it your assertion that Taylor Swift should be treated by that officer handling traffic for her event like everyone else? Clearly not. Everyone else is there because of her. Of course, she doesn't get treated the same by the cops fulfilling the traffic role. She has a special entrance, special parking, special rules. She's allowed to park in places other people aren't. She's allowed through entrances other people aren't. She's allowed down closed off streets, etc. So yeah, Scotty on a night out of town, like everyone else. Scotty sitting in traffic at a PGA tournament where thousands of people are literally showing up to see him play as the number one golfer. No, he isn't everyone else. He's very natural to think he should be treated differently and have different rules in that situation. So when a person of authority comes up and says, hey, go ahead, go on around, and it's dark, and you see an officer signaling you differently than he says officer that just told him to go around, according to reports, and thinks, well, maybe they just don't realize who I am. I think he acted in a very reasonable way. Scheffler did. So if you're blaming Scheffler with what we currently know, you're wrong, in my opinion. Now on to the police officer. Is it the cop's fault? Most likely not. I honestly don't know enough exactly about initial arrest protocol and police work to make that judgment. Him trying to stop the vehicle with hand signs, him like grabbing onto the vehicle like that probably is improper police procedure. I think he probably just kind of panicked in the moment. You know, you got a big situation going on. Somebody lost their life and you're acting up. You see somebody you think's acting up, you deal with them. him pulling out Scotty, detaining him, okay. I mean, you're tasked with directing traffic. If someone did tell Scotty to do what he was doing and that officer didn't get the message, so you're trying to execute the job you were given with the knowledge you had. And normally, if someone did what Scotty did, you would handle it the same way because you didn't know somebody was supposed to be treated differently. Where I start to wonder, though, if the officer is any blame here is after the incident. So you get Scotty out of the vehicle, you detain him, then what? Is it police procedure? You have Scotty detained, now you investigate, or is it not? Do you just immediately arrest him and see him down there? Do you say, hey, I see you're in a PGA vehicle. Why didn't you listen to me? Oh, someone told you to go around? I see, so this is a misunderstanding. Like, is that allowed? Like, this isn't, theft or murder or something that warrants a lot more investigation, and maybe you arrest somebody when you think they're guilty of murder and while you charge them and gather evidence and as such. But this is one where I just wonder how much discretion can the officer show here? Because once again, if the story here that Scotty is saying is accurate, that he did what he did because somebody told him he could, a person of authority, and that is accurate, and as of recording this, we don't know this for sure, but I would almost bet $1,000 these charges get dropped. If that is accurate, these charges will get dropped. Now you would say, well, the officer couldn't maybe question him because he had a job to do. But remember, it took an officer to take Scotty then downtown. So it's not like you saved on personnel. All you've done here is waste tax dollars. And some people would say, well, he only is getting the charges dismissed because he's Scotty Scheffler. And if it was you or I who did it, we wouldn't be treated the same way. Well, yeah, kinda. If I ever was in a situation where I jumped the curb at a PGA tournament to go around an accident, I would be arrested and treated differently than Scotty because I am not a pro PGA player. So I don't think I'll ever be in a position where the police are directing traffic outside an event where thousands of people are coming to see me. And chances are you most likely won't be in that kind of position either. And so if we aren't in that position ever, and then, we tried to jump a curb to go around traffic, sure, we would not be treated the same in that same exact situation. We don't have the reasoning possible to us that Scotty does. Now, here's why I don't know if it's a cop's fault or not. I don't know what police policies come into place after he has Scotty arrested. Can he investigate? To what degree can he? How much discretion can he show? Is he now forced to go ahead and take him to jail? Because if he doesn't, he's worried he's going to get sued. I just don't know enough about that to pass judgment and the after-incident decision-making process. During the incident, somewhat makes sense. After the incident, I start to wonder. Because I think this goes to an overall problem when it comes to our policing methods. Whether it's due to staffing levels, training, or company policy, I don't know, but there is failure at the leadership level. Which leads me to the people that are trying to make this about Breonna Taylor or Back the Blue being somehow dumb, Republicans. Now you see how awful cops are because your favorite golfer got arrested. First, Back the Blue doesn't mean a cop never does anything wrong. Being pro-police doesn't mean you think they all do an amazing job. Just like to the left, I'm sure, believe all women doesn't actually mean believe all women, especially if they're blaming a Democrat for something. And Back the Blue means we recognize that being a police officer is a hard job. And we want you to have the best training and, most importantly, leadership you can. Leadership that doesn't hang you out to dry, but also leadership that doesn't support horrible policies. For an example, I back the Blue, but I think no-knock warrants are horrible policies and are disrespectful of the Second Amendment. Because a right to defend myself means that if someone busts down my door at 2 a.m. unannounced, I have a right to shoot them. And because Back the Blue means I never want to put police in a position where they can be legally shot at and killed, like we've seen in no-knock warrant situations where police have no-knock warrants entered a home, they've been shot at and even struck by somebody within the home, and then those people weren't even charged with the shooting of the officer, found not guilty of that, being ruled legal. Why would you want that policy in place? Why would you want a policy in place that allows police officers to be legally shot? And that goes to who is at fault here, really, in my opinion, and that is the leadership in these liberal cities. These BLM protesters come out protesting cops. Well, the mayors and governor joins them like they aren't the people making these policies. It's like the owner of a factory joining a picket line protesting his own factory. And Louisville leadership's incompetence problem is just rearing its ugly head here. Whether it's improper training or policies that embarrass Kentucky and the city and the result in taxpayer money wasted on this arresting of Scotty and everything else, decisions that make the PGA not want to return. Decisions like saying, let's park PGA tournament attendees 20 miles away in the Expo Center parking lot, which, by the way, I guess at one point it got like full or something, and they started parking people at the U of L stadium, which I couldn't understand how that happened until I looked at the Expo Center's website and see they scheduled early voting and an NCAA Women's College Recruiting Combine event there that, according to their flyer, has over 600 teams and 300 college coaches at it. And these are, keep in mind, high school students. Of course, they're not all necessarily riding together. So the unfortunate passing of the security guard, the handling of Scotty, really Louisville's issues for me in general, these problems, I knock it up to horrible leadership and policy making that we see in so many of these blue cities. Well, coming up after this, Representative Cole Carney looks like she's not going to be able to run for re-election through the typical means. We'll talk about that after this short break. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Those of you who listen to the show on a regular basis may remember I talked about this Representative Cole Carney situation. To remind you, Representative Cole Carney is a Democrat out of Louisville, and she had filed to run for office, but one of her filers at the time of signing the paperwork and past the filing deadline changed from a Republican to a Democrat. So that means when she was signing her paperwork, she was a registered Republican. That's a big problem because the requirements of running for office is that you get 2 signatures from 2 people of your party that live in the same district. And somehow she managed to find somebody that wasn't of her. She's an incumbent, keep in mind, and wasn't a registered Democrat at the time, was a registered Republican. And so after it was discovered that this was an issue, Cole Carney's defense here was that, well, we fixed it before it was ever certified by the Secretary of State. Now, those of you who listen to the show know at the time I said that defense was weak sauce. Weak sauce. Here's why. Because the signer of her document isn't even eligible to vote in the Democrat primary. So how can you claim that it's okay for you to have messed up this signature? It ends up being okay. Well, we fixed it before it was certified by the Secretary of State. So that means that it was fixed and we are good to go. Well, how can you make that claim when the person who signed the paperwork isn't even eligible to vote in the Democrat primary? That kind of knocks it up against you. And then also, too, the paperwork's very clear. When they are signing that paperwork as your signer, they are attesting. It is signed and certified by a notary, even, that what you're saying is true, the statement's true, and the statement says that you're a registered Democrat on the date you sign it, which in her case wasn't accurate. Makes an invalid document. The person literally, in a way, committed perjury on the document. Well, initially, a judge there in Louisville had said, Mitch Perry, said, no, she's fine to stay on the ballot. And he was clearly wrong. At the time, I'm like, he is clearly wrong. She clearly cannot stay on the ballot. She needed to have been disqualified. Her paperwork was incorrect. Well, the appeals court has now jumped in and they ruled 3-0 that she is not allowed to be on the ballot. She's being disqualified from the Democrat primary in her own district because she messed up her filing paperwork for office. And unless she gets an emergency hearing at the Kentucky Supreme Court, and she'd have to get that like today, which probably isn't going to happen, then there will even be signs posted at polling locations informing people that she is no longer eligible for the ballot. She's been disqualified from the ballot. And that means that William Zeitz of Louisville will be the Democrat nominee for this state House representative position, as he is the only other person, Republican or Democrat, that has filed to run. Now, technically, Kulkarni could try to run a write-in campaign in November. Those are notoriously difficult, but it has been done before. I remember in Buffalo, there was a Democrat primary where a very, very far left Democrat had won the primary, beating out the current sitting mayor. And then the current sitting mayor mounted a write-in campaign for the general and actually won. So it is possible that Kulkarni could try to run a write-in campaign in November, but it would be really hard. So the question becomes, what do I know about William then? It looks like he'll be the next Democrat rep out of Louisville by sheer disqualification of Kulkarni. Well, nothing, really. He has no campaign website, according to KREF. He didn't even file saying he'd raise over $3,000. When he initially filed, he didn't even say he'd raised $3,000. So chances are he maybe even knew about Kulkarni's problem with her filing paperwork or something about that beforehand. Because like I said, he did not plan to run like a hard race at all. He filed last minute as well. So it's possible that she filed the paperwork. They pulled it real quick to see who was on it, saw the issue, and then jumped in. It's a stretch, but it'll be interesting to see, though, if Kulkarni ends up coming up with a write-in campaign for November to come back from this boo-boo mistake she has made. Speaking of court actions, Judge Philip Shepard out of Franklin Circuit Court has made a ruling on the restaurant tax as unconstitutional, but not the way I think he would have. Not the way I think it's unconstitutional. So, something to understand here. In Kentucky, local counties and cities cannot constitutionally, they are not allowed to charge a sales tax, which I've discussed before on here. And that can make tourism not very profitable. Because remember, the taxes they can charge are things like insurance tax, property tax, a payroll tax of sorts. That's kind of like it's like an occupational tax, but it's like it's basically an income tax. They can charge an income tax, and they can charge those taxes, but they can't charge a sales tax. Well, in 2014, the legislature decided to do something differently. Now, remember though, that is a constitutional thing that they cannot charge a sales tax, that local cities, counties cannot charge a sales tax. Constitutional. And of course, tourism, therefore, isn't very profitable necessarily to counties and cities. It can be difficult because, sure, it creates jobs, but the occupational tax you get off that, the income tax you get off those jobs in the tourism sector are typically not very high paying. Any profitability that comes off the business, you could make some taxes from, but generally speaking, those are not nearly as profitable as something like a factory is. So with how our taxing system is set up now, you would take a factory that makes, $5 million a year over a restaurant that makes $5 million a year. If you're one of these local city governments, a restaurant does not nearly help your bottom line because of your limits on how you can tax. And that is a constitutional requirement, and it's important that we notate that going into this discussion. So, with that in mind, in 2014, the legislature passed a law that essentially allowed cities with less than 8,000 people to levy what they called a restaurant sales tax. It wasn't a sales tax, it was a restaurant tax on checks, on bills that could go towards funding tourism. Now, those of you who didn't see me, which is all of you, I did scare quotes around tourism. Because what does that actually mean? What is tourism? And actually, people like the people who brought the plaintiff, the complaint here, Hazard, the city Hazard brought this complaint, pointed out that, tourism things can be used for all kinds of great things that people that live in the area can really benefit from too as well. So they're admitting that it gives them the ability to do more for their local residents that really they're saying is tourism, but maybe really isn't tourism, right? And we can base that upon how cities have grown and not grown. But anyways, so it allows them, if they have less than 8,000 people in the city, to charge a restaurant tax. Now, personally, I get it. that the court can invent whatever loophole or whatever, and the legislature can try to come up with whatever loophole they want to. But I think this type of thing is clearly ridiculous. It is just a sales tax by another name, and it drives me absolutely crazy and up a wall when the legislature does this kind of thing. When they deliberately invent new terms and ideas to deliberately get around our state constitution in order to avoid having to do the hard work of changing the Constitution and do the hard work of convincing other people that it is a good idea. So, how did Philip Shepard rule on this? What's the implications? Well, we will have that after this short break. You'll listen to the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. If you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. You can also head on over to theandrewshow.com and hit the contact tab, but we'll be back in a few short minutes. Judge Philip Shepard has made a ruling on the restaurant tax law for cities under 8,000 as unconstitutional. That was a story we were covering before the break. Kind of went over some backstory of this. Hopefully you heard it. If you didn't, head over to theandrewshow.com. Hit the Listen Now tab if you're listening on the radio, and you can listen to old shows there, and at 1 o'clock this will be posted. But anyways, so he has ruled it as unconstitutional, but not the way I think he should have. So understand that since local counties and cities cannot constitutionally charge sales tax, as what I've discussed before, in 2014, the legislature passed a law that essentially allowed cities with less than 8,000 to go ahead and charge a restaurant tax of 3% for tourism. So he didn't rule, though, that the entire law is unconstitutional, as I believe he should have. I mean, if you want to charge a sales tax, then do a constitutional amendment. And hey, if you proposed a local option sales tax but got rid of the ability for the state or local governments to charge an income tax of any kind, so occupational tax and state income tax, then I might even be inclined to support that constitutional amendment. Now, of course, a local option sales tax by itself you would hope never pass. At least you would really hope that we haven't lost our way as voters, so much so that we've fallen into so much unintelligence and so gullible that we would fall for some line about giving more money to the government being a good thing. You would hope we never would. No, Shepard instead ruled against this for being arbitrary. Why? Well, because the law locked in cities as where they were in 2014. Hazard, Kentucky at the time had more than 8,000 people, so they didn't qualify for the restaurant tax. But because it doesn't provide a way to move in and out of the category to allow you to charge a restaurant tax, and Hazard has fallen in population, they should be able to technically qualify. They're not being treated fairly because the state legislature has picked an arbitrary date. So that's why Hazard sued, saying they should have the right to charge a restaurant tax because they've fallen into allowance. And Shepard has said, yes, you should have the right to do it. Go ahead and allow them to do it. And he's called the law unconstitutional because it locks these cities in place. And he says that they need to change the law. He's called now on the legislature to go ahead and fix this next session. And if ever there was a reason to be careful about how you vote tomorrow, this is it. Because Shepard has now made a call saying this law is unconstitutional. You've locked cities into place. And so the legislature now has three options in front of them. They could repeal the law completely. Get rid of it. No more local restaurant taxes. Or they could go ahead and say, look, they've ruled this as unconstitutional, so we're going to provide a way for cities to move in and out, which means if you live in a city less than 8,000 and you're not getting a restaurant tax right now, you could end up getting that. Or a third option, which is going to be the worst and the one they most likely go for. It opens up the door for the legislature to go ahead and remove any holding rules on the restaurant sales tax and instead allow every single city in the state to charge a local restaurant sales tax. And when called out for doing this, and when people try to tell legislators, I don't like what you've done here, I disagree with what you're doing. Well, they will now be able to claim, look, we didn't want to do this, but we had to pass the bill because the courts have ruled that by us not passing this law, we are somehow acting in an unconstitutional way. And all the uninformed people out there won't know that they didn't have to do that. They could have repealed it completely. They could have allowed cities to move in and out, but they chose not to. And that's why I call this a dangerous moment. We've seen these other dangerous moments tried. We've seen this with electric vehicles and the gas tax, where in order to get you upset, they'd say, look, electric vehicles aren't paying their fair share. Why is it fair that you have to pay so much in gas tax? But here, these electric vehicles, they don't pay anything. We should pass a law to change that, to tax those electric vehicles. And you're like, yeah, we should. And what'd they slip in there? Well, you were somehow wanting to both be equally treated by the same crushing boot of government taxation. Well, they tried to slip in there increasing your gas tax too. They got you all on the side of one part of the bill so they could slip in something else. Anything they can do in order to sneak one by you. They've done the same thing with their whole task to cut income tax. They increased the overall tax burden on the Kentucky citizen. We know this because tax revenues have increased more than population growth has increased. More than people working has increased. So we know that every person is paying more in taxes now than they did before they started this whole entire endeavor. But yet people clap for it. In fact, I see people like me who call this out and people like me that are running for office that call this out. I see them getting attacked for this, saying, oh, they're against cutting taxes. Because, of course, the establishment knows that the average voter is too uninformed in order to understand that they're literally attacking somebody for saying that you're being taxed too much. But that's what they do. They rely on uninformed people. That's why I say, I don't want everybody to vote. I only want informed people to vote. I don't care about turnout rates. I care about how informed the people turning out are. That's why it's so important to me, because if we don't see a difference, we'll go ahead and continue to make these awful, horrible decisions. Now on to Miss Jacqueline Coleman, our illustrious and wonderful lieutenant governor. I'm saying that, of course, ironically. She tweeted out recently a meme that said this. Said, I want to learn to play golf and the public course is offering free lessons. I want a more exclusive experience though, so I want to learn at a private country club. I also want the public course to pay for my membership. Now you understand how school vouchers work. This is incredibly dumb statement and comment by her. Why is it so dumb? Well, first, everybody in the state had to learn golf. Of some kind. Somehow you had to learn golf, right? You can learn it at home from your parents if they can teach golf. If they're the type of person that can do that, you can learn it from them, or you can learn golf from a public course, or you can learn golf from a private course. But legally speaking, you have to learn to play golf. If you also, not only did you have to learn golf of some sort, but the local governments and state governments required to, by state constitution, fund golf lessons for everyone to as well. So if a golf course, a public golf course, was doing a bad job teaching golf to people, they didn't have the choice or ability, the local governments wouldn't have the choice or ability to shut down that course and say, okay, we're not teaching golf anymore. We've dumped all this money into it, and less than half the people are proficient at golf after doing this for 13 years. Less than half are proficient at golf, but we can't shut this down because legally we have to keep funding this tire fire. Well, sure. Okay. Then that would be maybe starting to be a bit more, accurate. Local, they say, I want a more exclusive experience though. So I want to learn at a private country club. Well, no, it's not that you want an exclusive experience. No. That's like saying, I'm going to the public course to get these lessons I'm required to get, by law, can't not get them, but I'm not actually learning to play golf. Actually, while I'm trying to learn to play golf, the golf instructor is asking me about who I think I might be sexually attracted to, and asking me about my gender identity, and asking me about if I want to hear about their weekend plans. Instead of teaching me golf, they're doing that. That would maybe be more accurate, of course. That would fall maybe more in line. Regardless, it's clear this is not a real allegory. It doesn't work. Okay? It's reaching. But it's the exact kind of thoughts we'd expect from Democrats that want you to use just as little logic as possible. Maybe that's why they're so dedicated to a failing educational system. Because if you actually learn something, well, you may start realizing how full of it people like Jacqueline Coleman are. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Thank y'all so much for joining me. Remember, tomorrow, go out, vote, as long as you're informed, but you listen to the show, so of course you are. Go out there and vote. Otherwise, we'll be seeing you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.